Pontius Pilate, the man who sentenced Jesus to crucifixion. But have you ever stopped to think that behind this decision was much more than just a religious judgment? Pilate was caught in a deadly political web, torn between the fury of a constantly rebellious province and the relentless pressure to maintain his loyalty to the most powerful empire in the world. You might think that the trial of Jesus was a clear-cut decision. But what if I told you Pilate was in an impossible position? Any decision he made could cost him his prestige or worse, his own head. He wasn't just judging a man, he was balancing the fate of his career and the entire province. What drove his decisions? Fear, ambition, or a sense of duty? The truth about what really happened in that trial is more complex than you might think. Today, we're going to explore how Pilate's political decisions not only changed the course of history, but also reveal the harsh reality of power and survival in the Roman Empire. Stay tuned, because what you're about to discover will change your perspective on one of history's most significant events. Let's get started. Judea was a province that constantly challenged Roman authority. Located at the crossroads between East and West, this region buzzed with a mix of cultural, political, and religious traditions that even Rome's military power couldn't fully suppress. Governing there was like walking a tightrope. The local society, composed of religious groups with a deep attachment to their traditions, reacted with distrust and resistance to Roman occupation. For the empire, Judea was a strategic territory. For the Jews, it was the promised land that should not be under foreign control. Within this cauldron of tensions, the Roman administration had to maintain peace at all costs. Rebellions, like those that had erupted before, pose a real threat not only to the province's stability, but also to the reputation of the governors sent there. Rome tolerated little failure from its representatives, especially in problematic territories. Control over Judea was not just a military issue. It was a political and psychological battle, involving winning the obedience of a population that valued its own laws and beliefs above any imperial power. Pontius Pilate entered this arena as the new governor, tasked with maintaining order in a notoriously difficult province. Leadership in Judea wasn't just about enforcing laws, but surviving the complex local intrigues. Relations with religious leaders were crucial, and Pilate quickly realized that his power depended on how he navigated these interactions. On one hand, he needed to show strength to Rome. On the other, he needed to avoid uprisings that could have fatal consequences for his career. Besides tensions with the Jews, Pilate also faced internal pressures within the empire itself. Provincial governors were evaluated on their ability to maintain order and ensure the flow of taxes and resources to Rome. Any sign of weakness could result in his removal from office or, worse, a trial before the Senate. Pilate's ambition was therefore not just about maintaining local order, but also about preserving his position and reputation. For him, Judea was a political trap, and his survival depended on his ability to maneuver through these challenges. In this context, the arrival of figures like Jesus of Nazareth, who attracted large crowds and challenged religious and political authority, became a sensitive issue. Jesus represented a danger, not just for what he preached, but for how the population reacted to him. For Pilate, dealing with this situation wasn't a religious matter, but a direct threat to the political stability of his administration. Pontius Pilate, as the Roman governor of Judea, was more than just a bureaucrat. He represented Rome's authority in one of the empire's most challenging provinces. His appointment reflected both his ambition and Rome's expectation that he would maintain order in a region marked by religious and political conflicts. However, the position came with immense pressures, and every decision he made could have repercussions for both his career and personal safety. Pilate's role was complicated by the intrinsic nature of Judea. Unlike other more pacified provinces, the Jews resisted Roman influence, not just militarily, but culturally and religiously. The sense of belonging to a sacred land, combined with a history of liberation from foreign domination, made the local population extremely sensitive to any sign of oppression. Pilate, therefore, was not just governing. He was balancing between Rome's demands and a people whose fierce pride viewed occupation as an affront to their identity. Behind each of Pilate's decisions was also a personal survival game. Like any Roman governor, he was aware that his position was precarious. Rome closely monitored its governor's performance, and any failure could cost him his job or, in more severe cases, his life. Maintaining order was essential, but Pilate also knew he couldn't appear weak in the eyes of his superiors. This often meant making tough choices, weighing the risks of popular revolt against the consequences of displeasing Rome's elite. The trial of Jesus, therefore, was not just about deciding the fate of one man, but about balancing the interests of different forces pressing on Pilate from all sides. On one hand, Jewish religious leaders demanded action, seeing Jesus as a threat to their authority. On the other hand, Pilate feared that an execution could provoke the people's anger, leading to further revolts. He was caught between the duty to maintain peace and the need to show loyalty to the empire, even if it meant making unpopular decisions. Moreover, Pilate's behavior was strongly influenced by his understanding of Roman politics. He knew Rome expected concrete results from its governors, especially in problematic regions like Judea. For him, the execution of Jesus could be seen as a necessary act to maintain control, even if he personally did not believe in the seriousness of the charges. Thus, his decisions during the trial reflect less of a personal belief and more of a quest for political survival in a highly unstable environment. From the beginning of his tenure, Pontius Pilate faced a delicate power struggle with the religious authorities of Judea. The Sanhedrin, led by the high priests, wielded significant influence over the local population while maintaining a troubled relationship with the Roman administration. For Pilate, keeping this religious elite relatively satisfied was crucial to avoiding civil disturbances, but that didn't mean he would easily bow to their demands. The tensions between the governor and the Sanhedrin were palpable, with each side trying to gain political advantages. The religious leaders saw Jesus not only as a spiritual threat, but also a political one. His growing popularity and the way he spoke against established powers created discomfort among the Sanhedrin members, who feared losing their authority over the people. When Jesus was brought to trial, the Jewish authorities not only wanted to eliminate him, but needed Pilate's support to legitimize the execution. For the Sanhedrin, condemning Jesus for blasphemy was necessary, but only with Roman sanction would this condemnation carry the weight of a final sentence. Pilate, on the other hand, viewed the situation differently. According to Roman laws, the charge of blasphemy was not a crime that warranted death. However, the Sanhedrin leaders knew how to manipulate the situation, arguing that Jesus' self-proclamation as the king of the Jews constituted an insurrection against Roman authority. This point was crucial in pressuring Pilate to consider Jesus' execution as an act of defending the empire. By framing the issue politically, the Jewish authorities shrewdly placed Pilate in a deeper dilemma. This political tension between Pilate and the Sanhedrin became evident during Jesus' interrogations. The governor, visibly uncomfortable with the accusations, attempted several times to shift the responsibility to the religious leaders themselves, or even to King Herod, who governed Galilee. However, the Sanhedrin insisted on direct action from Pilate, manipulating both the situation and Jesus' words to force a decision that served their own interests. This power struggle put Pilate in an even more uncomfortable position, with the Sanhedrin pushing the narrative that Jesus was a threat to the empire. Pilate realized that his refusal to condemn him could lead to an uprising, which would jeopardize his already fragile relationship with the Jewish elite. In the end, the conflict with the religious authorities of Judea proved decisive for Jesus' fate. Pilate, who initially hesitated, was forced to sacrifice his own sense of justice to maintain political order and protect his position before Rome. Beyond the religious authorities, there was another crucial element weighing on Pontius Pilate's decisions: the people. In a society where revolts were common and resentment against Roman rule was latent, popular pressure could be a devastating force. Jesus' trial took place during the Passover, a time that attracted large crowds to Jerusalem, increasing the tension between the Roman occupiers and the Jews. For Pilate, maintaining peace during this period was a matter of political survival. The crowd gathered before Pilate was far from passive. The influence of religious leaders over the people was clear, and the clamor for a swift and definitive condemnation of Jesus resonated intensely. Pilate, in trying to free Jesus by offering the traditional choice to release a prisoner during Passover, was surprised by the crowd's response, which chose Barabbas, a notorious criminal, instead of Jesus. This moment clearly demonstrated how public opinion could be manipulated by political forces. The fear of a mass revolt was something Pilate could not ignore. The mere presence of a large crowd represented a direct threat to stability. At such moments, Roman leadership needed to make quick and precise decisions to avoid riots, and Judea's history of popular uprisings was always on Pilate's mind. The potential for an uprising during Passover, especially with heightened religious tensions, could lead to catastrophic consequences, not only for his local governance but also for his position before Rome. However, Pilate was not only concerned with the crowd present. There was also the perception that a highly visible public trial, like that of Jesus, could have ramifications far beyond Jerusalem. Crucifixion was a punishment reserved for the worst criminals, a clear message from Rome about the fate of those who challenged its authority. But in judging Jesus, Pilate knew he was treading on sensitive ground where political decisions and religious convictions clashed. Thus, popular pressure became the final factor that led Pilate to make his decision. Even believing in Jesus' innocence, he could not risk his own position and the peace of the province. The fear of revolt, combined with the manipulation of the masses by the religious authorities, forced Pilate to sacrifice his own sense of justice for the sake of political survival. His famous act of washing his hands was less an act of cowardice and more a recognition that he was cornered by forces much larger than himself. Beyond local pressures, Pontius Pilate faced the constant shadow of Rome's expectations. The empire was relentless in its demand for efficiency and order in its provinces. Governors who failed to maintain stability were swiftly replaced or worse, put on trial for incompetence. For Pilate, the trial of Jesus was just a piece in a much larger puzzle, where his own political survival depended on how he managed Judea. His greatest fear was not the revolt itself, but the impact that an insurrection would have on his reputation with the emperor and the Senate. Emperor Tiberius, who ruled at the time, had a pragmatic view of imperial administration. What mattered most was that governors kept their provinces under control, ensured tax payments, and suppressed any attempts at rebellion. Pilate knew that a revolt in Jerusalem during Passover wouldn't be seen as just a local problem, but as an administrative failure that would quickly reach the emperor's ears. News spread rapidly across the vast empire, and chaos in a distant province could result in serious consequences for any governor. Pilate was also aware that his colleagues in Rome were always watching. The political circle in the empire was ruthless, and any sign of weakness or incompetence could be exploited by political enemies. Climbing the imperial hierarchy wasn't just about merit, but also about alliances and avoiding scandals. For Pilate, losing control of Judea could mean more than the end of his career. It could lead to exile or even death if accused of treason or mismanagement. Every decision was a matter of personal survival. In this context, the trial of Jesus took on even greater political significance. Pilate didn't see Jesus as a direct threat to the empire, but as a potential spark that could ignite a rebellion. The crucifixion of Jesus wasn't just a way to appease the religious authorities, but also a means to send a clear message. Anyone who challenged the established order would be severely punished. This was the kind of stance Rome expected from its governors in difficult regions like Judea. However, the cost of this decision was high. By sacrificing Jesus, Pilate was ensuring, at least temporarily, order in the province. But he also knew that this choice carried a moral weight. In deciding on the crucifixion, Pilate wasn't just executing a man. He was submitting to the empire's brutal logic, where power was maintained through force and intimidation. For Rome, Pilate had fulfilled his duty. But deep down, he knew that history might judge him differently. Pontius Pilate's decision to condemn Jesus was not made lightly, nor was it without internal struggle. Despite external pressures from Rome, the religious authorities, and the crowd, there was a conflict within the governor himself. The famous scene where he washes his hands, declaring himself innocent of Jesus' blood, reflects this internal division. Unlike the religious leaders, Pilate didn't see Jesus as a mortal threat. He knew that the real danger lay in yielding to external demands, but he also recognized that any decision he made would be imperfect. This duality was evident during Jesus' interrogation. Pilate asked direct questions, trying to understand who Jesus was and whether he truly posed a threat. Jesus' silence and enigmatic answers only intensified the governor's perplexity. Here was a man who didn't seem to seek political power or incite a rebellion, yet still caused immense turmoil. Pilate, with all his political experience, found himself facing a riddle. He knew Jesus didn't fit the traditional mold of a criminal, but the forces at play forced him to treat him as one. The pressure increased as the trial progressed. Pilate's wife, according to historical accounts, dreamed of Jesus and warned him about the possible consequences of condemning him. This personal interference only heightened the governor's discomfort. He found himself increasingly pressured from all sides, and his attempts to avoid responsibility, such as sending Jesus to Herod, failed. Pilate was caught between his duty to Rome and a deep sense that he was making an irreversible mistake. Pilate's internal struggle can also be seen as a reflection of the inherent contradictions of Roman power. On one hand, he was the representative of the greatest political and military force of the time. On the other, he was just a man trying to survive in a system that demanded quick and ruthless decisions. By washing his hands, Pilate wasn't just distancing himself from Jesus' execution. He was acknowledging the moral impotence that power can impose. He knew that, no matter what he did, he would be criticized for his decision. Thus, Jesus' condemnation reveals Pilate's weakness in the face of an uncontrollable situation. He had absolute power, but paradoxically, was a prisoner of circumstances larger than himself. Pilate's internal struggle is the climax of his political trajectory in Judea. A man divided between the duty to maintain order and the perception that, in doing so, he was condemning an innocent. And this decision, while ensuring temporary peace in the province, marked him forever in history.